Hello, welcome to Life, Art, and Spirit. I'm your host, Carl Bailey, and you have a treat today. We have an author, and I actually want to say you're kind of an artist because you also do t-shirts and hoodies and those type of things. But we have an author today of this book, which is entitled Prayer, Faith, and Guts, Determined to Make It, by Janice Marie Hunt. And this is my guest, Janice Marie Hunt.
Thank you.
I just want to give them a little background. So how did I meet Miss Hunt? So I just happened to be on one of my little journeys to the library, and Miss Hunt was set up over at the library, and we had a short and very interesting conversation. I'll go into that later because I want to talk about some of your products. But and you were gracious enough to bless me with this book, which surprised me and definitely blessed me. And it actually, I think I mentioned to you before, it gave me a little insight into what my mom's life must have been like, because you shared a little bit about your mother and how she didn't know who her dad was. And that's my mother, that's part of her story as well. For a long time she didn't know who her father was. So I'll just let you share a little bit about this book first. We know what the inspiration was your mother, right?
Correct.
Like where were you like in life that you thought, I wanna share this?
3 years ago, I decided to write the book to honor my mom while she's alive and well and in her right frame of mind. What prompted me to do that was every time we went to a funeral, I heard people talking about the individuals. And they said all these wonderful things about them. And I thought, that's okay for the family, but the deceased can't hear it. And so I made a decision then. I said, while she's here, I'm going to tell her everything I want to tell her. I'm going to say things to her that she wouldn't normally hear me say if she should pass away before me. And that was my reason for that, prompted me to actually write the book, and that started the journey.
That's beautiful. So you wanted to give her roses while she was still here?
Absolutely.
Okay. So you gave me, I asked for a list of questions to ask you because a lot of times when I watch interviews, I feel like sometimes the people that are there, in my mind, I'm always thinking, what if they had a question that they want to be asked? So I just asked you to give me some questions, and you just answered the first one, what your inspiration was. Well, you answered one of them. So what are some of the life lessons you learned from your mom?
The life lessons that I continually learn from my mom. I currently live with my mom. She's still alive. She's 82 years old. And her faith, her resilience. And she always says to all four of us, I'm the oldest of four, be good to yourself. And she always led by example. And life lessons, she said, be good to yourself. Who's going to be better to you than you? And just watching her go through what she's gone through, losing my father very young, those are some life lessons. Very resilient and gutsy.
So you got a lot of your strength, you would think, from your mom. And
absolutely.
Absolutely, your faith from your mom.
Definitely.
Some of the things that I read in the book, like I said, we'll get into that a little deeper, but they were pretty awesome to me. So what are some moments or accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Writing this book.
Writing the book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I feel like, you know what? Out of everything I've done in my life, I got the opportunity to honor my mom. I not only wrote the book, last year I actually had a billboard up on Fillmore and Oppenheimer. And I told Mom, I says, come on, I got something I want to show you. And so I drove up there and she was like, I said, this is for you. So my accomplishments, my proudest moments is to see the excitement on her face. Not what the book, the billboard, I actually did a calendar for 2023. And then when I did these t-shirts and everything, I said, Mom, we're going all the way. So these are my proudest moments.
So this might be one of my proudest moments, because maybe this is my, your first step to that. Well, not your first, because you did the book and everything. But so how? Let me ask you this question,
Okay.
because I've met a lot of people, and me being one of them. Everybody has a book in them, and then God is usually prompting them to do it. So how long was He prompting you before you actually did it?
I had said I was going to write a book for a long time, and all I did was just say it. And then one day I said, you know what? There was no specific prompt. It's just that I sat down at my laptop and just started typing. The entire book was already inside of me. I knew exactly how I wanted to lay it out. There's a little story about how I laid it out. I was inspired by a professor at UB.
Mm.
I can't recall his name right now. I'm sure it'll come back to me. I liked he wrote short stories. And each story also represented Buffalo. It was always talking about streets and whatever. I said, if I ever write a book, I'm going to take a page from his book. I'm going to be writing about streets and scenarios. And then another book, Laying On of Hands by Brenda Rose Miller, was another book that inspired me. And I said, whenever I write a book, I'm going to lay my book out like that. And that, when I sat down, I immediately just started typing. Everything in there came from what was inside of me. I didn't have to ask my mom about anything, recall anything. Everything was already inside of me because I'm part of her. So it took me 3 months to write it.
What does prayer mean to you?
Talking to God, real simple. Nothing complicated, nothing, hard. Just talking like I'm talking to you.
So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at the camera, and I want you to say that again and break that down, because you know what? A lot of people, that's a stumbling block for people, because they feel like maybe they haven't been to church, or they go to church and they see all of these big, thou art and all of these big and, words, and they think that they have to be all animated and everything, but it's simple conversation.
Simple conversation.
So just tell them out there, like, what was it?
Prayer to me is just a conversation, like I'm talking to Carl. A conversation, not thises and thous and all of that. Just a plain, simple conversation, as if you're talking to a best friend. How would you talk to your friend? You would share your most deepest secrets to them, and you would be very vulnerable and open. Prayer to me is really simple. Just talking to God. That's it.
Okay. All right, so now I'm going to break into some things with the book. So we talked about this a little bit, but one of the things that touched me the most, and I actually was sharing this with my daughter today. We were at a little restaurant, and we were having our production meeting, and we were talking about just this particular story. And this one is again, I want to address what you were saying about how you wrote a bunch of little short stories. Let me just tell you something. Not an avid reader, right? So this helped me because, sometimes I think like, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that's like this. Mm-hmm. Because I'm really an auditory learner, visual learner, and so sometimes just sitting down reading a book takes a little extra focus for me. And sometimes when I look at all of those chapters, like I get a little intimidated. And I feel like, oh, this is going to be like a road trip. It's supposed to be like a road trip. But, I mean, in the sense of just being, like maybe a little discouraged about reading it. But because this was short chapters and little stories and stuff like that, I found it more engaging. Like it pulled me in instead of me just like, I'm going to be real with you, I daydream a lot. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to take off and, and miss stuff.
Okay.
So this allowed me to not, take off. I was engaged, but I was really engaged in the one particular story when you talked about your mom and how. What age was your mom when she worked at the store? Tell me a little bit about the store and where it was and that type of thing. Set me up for the.
Okay, the chapter you're talking about is learning to count money. Mm-hmm. The store was called Hunt's Delicatessen, on the corner of French and Kerr. And actually the store is still there. The physical building is still there. This was probably in around 1972 or 73. We had just moved to this side of town. We didn't live on French Creek, but on this side of town. And at that time, I'm not sure how old my mom was. I can only say this. She probably was in her late 30s, maybe 40s. And the only reason why I can say that is because my father passed away in 1983. And my mom was 42. So it was very close around that time. But it was on the corner of French and Kerr called Hunt's Delicatessen.
Right. And so your mom was working in the store.
Mm-hmm.
And she couldn't count. She couldn't count money.
Correct.
And she was like a teenager, I'm sure, right?
No. She had to be, I'm thinking, in her 30s, maybe?
She was 30. She was 30. Okay,
She's much older.
And so
I was 12. I was around 12, 13 years old. Yes.
So, and just say this, right? So, an adult not being able to count, it's like, equated to being like illiterate pretty much, right? And I can imagine how embarrassing that must have been.
Absolutely.
Particularly like a woman, and your mom is a beautiful woman.
Thank you.
So I can imagine like what, I can just imagine what it might have felt like to not feel, even, with everything, her faith and all of this, inadequate. It must have made her feel. And then when she had the conversation with her dad, it's her dad, right, or her uncle in the car on the way home.
That was my dad, her husband.
Her husband.
My dad.
Right, your dad. Okay. And she went to the attic.
Correct.
And she, in pitch black.
Pitch black.
And just cried.
Cried out.
And then something supernatural happened.
Absolutely.
This is the stuff I like to talk about. Now break that down. Like, don't give them everything because I want them to read the book.
Okay.
But give them some symbolic,
Okay. Okay. What I like to first say is that when this happened, my mother really didn't have faith. She didn't even know what faith and prayer and all of that was. That didn't come until after my father passed away in 1983. So prior to that, she just knew what she knew. And everyone was working in the store, not just my mom and my dad. I had uncles, my dad's brothers also worked in the store.
Right.
And a lot of people worked in the store, but they couldn't leave her alone.
Right.
And so she came home one day and my father asked her a question in the car. And she said she just kept walking. And she didn't stop walking until she went to the attic. And that's when that supernatural occurrence happened.
I'm just I was picturing in my mind how humiliating that must be for a grown woman, like on a daily basis. Like she was always at the store, and they had married, and like I can't imagine being married. I can't imagine what type of issues even that created in the relationship because, like trust, I'm just thinking like even like she might have been an opportunity to look down on her because she couldn't, like she was less than, and she may have even been. I can imagine like in a peer group setting. That they might have even thought less of her, and maybe because you talked about this even in the book, that they maybe even treated her as such, like almost like a child.
Absolutely, she couldn't be left alone.
Right.
So I don't know if you remember, there used to be a business called Shoshone Brothers. I think it was on Broadway.
In the book, that's where they say they got their the meat and everything,
and so
their supplies.
Right. So she couldn't be left alone. Someone always had to be in the store with her. She couldn't be left alone to run the store. So yes.
But it was amazing to me, and I'm not going to give it away because I want, people to dive into this. There was a supernatural experience that happened. And because of that, I say even because the next day was a miracle. That's all that was.
That's all
a miracle. A beautiful thing. And that's one of those things that like, it touched my heart because I was thinking like, isn't that just like God? Right? It's like all of those people who probably thought all of these things about her, right? And then one day he showed up.
He did.
And then the next day he showed out.
He did.
And to the point of like, it was all gravy after that.
All gravy.
And you know, I can tell a little bit of it. Best day ever.
Best day ever.
Right?
Best day ever.
So, I mean, that's the God I serve.
That's the God we serve.
That's the God we serve.
That's the God we serve.
I love that. I mean, I often talk to people about, you know, we're in these shells, but we're living in a spiritual world.
We are.
There are things that are happening to us that we don't understand, right? I won't say all of us don't understand, but those that are tapped in, we understand.
Absolutely.
And then, like, because when you're tapped in and you understand, then you can fight in the spirit, not physically.
Exactly.
Right? So, but for God to show up like that and show her how much he loved her.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What's that thing in the Bible? I shall not be mocked.
I should not be
right?
mocked.
I bet she was mocked every day.
You know it. And you know what? That chapter almost didn't make it in the book. When I sat down and started putting it together, I knew exactly how I was going to lay out chapter by chapter. And the reason why it's so small is because that's all needed to be said. Someone said, why you didn't put more in there? Believe it or not, I couldn't. When I finished, I sat there and I thought about it. And after I typed it, I printed it out and gave it to her. And I told her to read it. Because I wanted her to read it before I did anything else with it. She laughed. She cried. And she was very apprehensive about that chapter. I told her, I said, you know what, think about it and pray on it. And if you want me to remove it, I will. And so, sometime later, she said, you know what? It's part of my story. Leave it in there. I said, okay. And this was long before I even sent my manuscript to the publishing company. I said, you always have, this is your life. This is your experience and your story. Whatever you want me to say, I'll say that. Whatever you want me to remove, I will. And she said, let it stay.
I look forward to meeting your mom because I want to talk to her about that experience in particular, just because I just love, you know, I just love how God loves us, you know, and things like that shows me, like, you know, without giving up anything, you know, it shows me like just like, I mean, he gave his son, right? So yes. It's like he literally came and, you know, so I think that's inspiring to people. And I think the fact that I'm glad you put that chapter in the book, because I think, so working here on Jefferson Avenue, right? I see the best of us, I see the worst of us. And there are a lot of people around here who are illiterate. You know, we have the library next door, and people, you know, come and they learn, you know, and people, you know, in our community are often, you know, going getting their GEDs. It could be years later, and you know, and no shame in that. And that story, I think, is so uplifting because, you know, we just say I'm just thinking about all of the shame that she went through, right? And so I can imagine being an adult person walking around who actually say illiterate, even without the counting, but being illiterate, not being able to read, like that's embarrassing. I remember as a child, I had this thing where when I was younger, like I couldn't tell time. Like 2 hours older, like I couldn't tell time. I don't know why I couldn't tell time. Honestly, I didn't want to learn how to tell time, to be honest with you. Right? Because I felt like people were forcing me to do it, and I just didn't want to learn how to do it. So I went to this school called Diocese Educational Campus, DEC. Right? And I remember the teacher, I would be in a hallway, and the teacher would be in a hallway, and she would say, can you tell me what time the clock say in there? And I would look, and I would ask another kid, what time that clock say? I can't see from here. Little stuff like that, just because I didn't want to do it. But it was embarrassing to me, right? Because it was my peers. After a while, you know, the jig was up. and people was like, dude can't tell time, right? And it was like, so, and then ultimately I had to learn how to tell time. But I think about that in the sense of people being illiterate, and the humiliation that comes along with that when you go into a place where, let's say for instance, you go with your kids and your kids can read, right? And they're reading, at a level higher than you, or there's some application that needs to be filled out and all of those things. And I think about that in the sense that, a person will walk around and they'll try to fix that themselves. Your mother had a visitation.
She had a visitation.
And in an instant, God fixed it. So I know that in itself was like, that was a way that her faith must have been so. I can imagine how loved she must have felt. Did she describe that to you, like what it felt like during that, or?
She didn't at that time, but now when we talk about it, God's love for us in everyday things. This story here, this occurrence that actually happened, lets us know that God is even concerned about the very simple things of our lives. And when I think about my mom's life, for those of us who read the Bible, we know about all the different people in the Bible, David and Job and Joshua and Caleb and all of those people. I don't know them.
Right.
But I know my mom. And so that's so relevant to me. Like, he cared enough to teach you how to count.
Right.
As an adult. She would often tell me, she said, I'm the oldest of 4. She said, you know what, Janice? You taught me how to do subtraction when you were a little girl. She said you would take the 2 apples and say, Mom, if I have 4 apples and I take away 2, how many would I have left? She said 2. She said if I have 5 pencils and took away 3, how many would I have left? She said, you're my oldest daughter. You taught me subtraction as a child. And I don't recall that at all.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What's your favorite part of the book? Or I'll say outside of that, what's another nugget that you really enjoyed in the book? What's another piece that you thought, like if you say you wanted to, in telling her story, what's another piece that you thought was very instrumental or important for you to tell?
The ongoing revelations. And the reason why that's important to me, or more poignant for me, is this. Even after I write this book, they're still ongoing. They're still ongoing. God continually talks to her, have conversations with her. They have dialogue, like you and I are talking. And she'll say, Janice, you know what? We were at my baby sister's house a couple days ago, and we were watching Sarah Jakes, I think T.D. Jakes' daughter. And while we were sitting there, she said, you know what I hear in my spirit? I said, what? She said, cultivate. What does that mean? And so I told her what that meant. So the next day, she said, write that down for me. Cultivate. And so he just talks to her. Cultivate. Start cultivating your gifts. Start cultivating the things that are inside of you. She said, I'm a country girl. I'm from down south. So I think about the soil and how you turn over the soil and you plant seeds and how you nurture things and stuff like that. And that was just a couple of days ago.
I wanted to say that when I was like just keep having these flashes in my head of, I can imagine. Let's say, for instance, there was somebody that comes to that store every day. They see your mom, right? And probably in the back of their mind, they were like, let me go to the other lady or the other person. And then that one day, like a miracle happened, like right before them. They probably didn't even know what to do with that. So she was a witness to I say to people, like, a lot of times, miracles happen every day.
Yes, they do.
Like, that was a miracle.
It was.
if you get so angry at someone that in a moment you can't forgive them, and then something happens and you change and you forgive them, that's a miracle, right? But something this big, like you literally saw a person not be able to count money, and then the next day it's so. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but the next day, everything changes. So,
but you know what though? Everyone, even now, there is still some embarrassment, some shame, I should say, some shame. Because people read the book, family members included and others, you didn't know how to count money? You didn't know how? And I've said this before. When you read Prayer, Faith, and God's Determined to Make It, based on your response, lets me know where you are. If you're able to see God in Prayer, Faith, and God's Determined to Make It, it lets me know that you are spiritual. If all you see is a woman who didn't know how to count money, who didn't know who her father was, who went through all these trials and challenges, you're carnal.
Right. You missed the whole thing.
You missed the whole thing.
Right. You stuck on, she couldn't count money? The miracle, you done missed it. You know what I mean? That would be like being there with Jesus and missing the whole everything and be like, but he died. But he rose?
But you know what?
Yeah.
People, individuals, still say the same thing, even today. That's why you probably lost the store. Maybe this is why that happened. Even today.
Right.
So it's a very, yeah.
But we're praying that God is going to work on them too. Yeah. So they can experience that same type of miracle that mom did.
Yes, definitely.
So I'm gonna allude to this other little story, but I'm not gonna tell what it was. But So you were talking about how your mom entered the room and she was talking to you, and there was an entity in that room.
Correct.
And your mom had been seeing this entity.
Correct.
And then you asked your mom, was it still present?
Correct.
And it was.
Correct.
And then you did what?
I told her, we were in her bedroom at the time, and I told her, I said, let's go in the living room. I want you to sit down on the couch. And I sat down on the floor in front of her at her feet, and I began to pray. And she said that the entity that was there, I had asked her a question prior to that. I asked her, was it a cat or a dog? She said no. And so in our living room, her on the sofa, me on the floor at her feet, I began to pray. And when I began to pray, she said, the entity didn't follow us into the living room. The entity walked out of her bedroom, through the hallway, through the kitchen, and through the walls, and out the door. And when I continued to pray, she continued to see the entity run. And that's what happened. I never saw the entity, and to be very honest with you, I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. The things that my mom sees, I don't want to see them. I don't think I would be prepared for that, something like that, personally.
So I'm gonna share with you a personal story. So this is just so the audience can kind of understand that in the spirit realm, these things exist. So I remember this to this day like it was yesterday. When I was a child, we used to live on this street, Marshall Street. And so in our house, you could walk to the front door and you could see all the way through the kitchen.
Okay.
So we had a couch that was like this way, and we could see into the kitchen, laying on the couch. So one night, I'm laying on the couch, and I'm asleep. I'm half asleep. I didn't know what was going on. I just know at one point, it's like I was just laying there, and I saw someone get on the cabinet in the kitchen, like oddly, not like a climbed up, but like some kind of weird TV type stuff. Like they just kind of, and landed on the thing, and they were looking at me, and I was laying there and I couldn't move. I was like paralyzed. I know you heard these stories about sleep paralysis, and I was looking, but I couldn't move. And then it got closer, and it was standing over me, and I could tell it was a she, whatever, you know, it was a female, and it was breathing on me, and I couldn't move, and I think I might have been like, I'm 10 and under, I know, right, and only thing I could think to do was say Jesus. And I don't even know why at that age, like we went to church and stuff like that, but I just know that that's how fearful I was, that the only name I knew to call on was Jesus. And then just like that, it broke right out the door. And honestly, I never even told my parents that story.
Why?
I don't know. I think I was scared to tell them. So I don't know. I think as a kid, I was so like, I didn't know if I was dreaming, if it was real, if it was not. But I can tell you in recollection, because when you know how your memory has feelings, like telling the story, I could feel the emotion, so I know it was a real thing that happened. Right, it wasn't a dream. I can tell the difference. But I know things like that happen. So like when I read that story, I was like, I love the fact that this is in there, because we have people walking around who don't understand that this stuff is real. Like, you could be standing in a room, and I use an example like this. I tell people all the time, like when we talk about spiritual discernment, right? I can remember being in, used to have these community meetings, right? And certain people will walk in the room, and I could tell the atmosphere changed. Now, you could call that attitude or whatever, but I'm telling you, it's the spirit that they carried with them, right? Because everything changed after that. It could be light, and then all of a sudden it's heavy. And we discount those things because we want to make carnal, designations for that kind of stuff. We want to make it seem like it's something in the natural, but it's a spiritual thing. What we felt was our spirit reacting to that negative spirit. I'll tell you one more story, and this is not even of a entity, but so I'm in film and television. That's my thing, right? So I was working on a film a while back, some years ago. I was an extra, like a background person in this film, and we were having lunch, and so it was like a very crowded room, maybe like 100 people in there, and you had to get up and go to the line. They were calling like table by table. And while I was sitting there was this woman, very beautiful lady. She was like I think she was like Indian or something. Very beautiful lady. And our eyes kept meeting, right? And I felt like weird every time. When I say weird, I felt like almost like, I don't suffer from anxiety, but I felt like kind of like a nervousness, right? And so every time I would go somewhere, I would get up and I would stand in line, and I would feel those eyes, and I would look, and she would be looking at me. And so I'm like, what is this? Like, I don't know what this is, right? And mind you, she's a very attractive woman, right? So I'm trying to figure out, like, what is going on in my mind, and what is, and so I got to one point in the line, and this woman moved from where she was, and she went to where I was sitting with the group of my, associates. And then, I turned away for a second, and I turned back, and then she was reading tarot cards and stuff on it. So then I immediately knew what that was I was sensing, right? And I did not even go back over there. I went and sat somewhere else, and when she left, I went and I talked to my friends. I was like, hey, I don't know what y'all was really doing there, but that is not which, this, I just, because, I was Christian, so I was explaining to them like that. You don't want to be doing all that, you know what I mean? But at that point, I wasn't, I would say as spiritually strong as I am. Like, I wouldn't have engaged, right? Even in the spirit. Like, I was praying, but I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have been warring, right? Like, now, if I see that, like, I'm in that moment, I'm warring, right? It's different.
Definitely.
And I know I would have drove her up out of there. She would have probably ran up out of there like the other spirit. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So, but yeah, that I can appreciate stuff like that because it's really real to me. You know,
it's real, and that lets me know where you are spiritually. That lets me know. A lot of people have. I won't say a lot of people. People that have read it have. You figure that book's been out 3 years now. And I can count maybe on one hand and 2 or 3 fingers. No one has ever given me any feedback. No one. No family members at all. No friends at all. Only a few.
Do you think that's out of fear, or like they just didn't know what to say, or like you think it was just like they were stuck on, she couldn't count? Maybe she was crazy or something like that, or
probably all the relatives that did speak on were stuck on not knowing how to count money.
Not knowing how to count.
That's where it was. That's where it was. One relative, when my mom mentioned to her that I wrote a book, and when she saw, she said, "Oh, it's a real book." And so my mom, I said, "Well, what did she think it was going to be?" But everyone who did mention it, the few, there were only a couple people that I asked to write a review online, and a few individuals that I actually knew that spoke spiritually. They understood the spiritual component and the God component in the book. And like I said, that was maybe on one hand.
Yeah, this is quite a book. Like I said, I wanted to get a copy for my mom because, I believe when people read stuff like this, there's deliverance in that, And even, like, again, going back to, like, your mom not being able to count, we are masters of hiding stuff, So I'm pretty sure that there were other people who couldn't count, couldn't read, and all other kind of stuff. So, but that's another story for another day. But so now I want to talk about you as an artist. So the t-shirts, the hoodies. This is one of my favorite colors, by the way.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted this one. You guys can see that. So and then there's the other one, and you have a number of them. So, like, now, what inspired this? Your mom as well, or?
My mom actually inspired the t-shirt. Prayer, Faith, and Guts Determined to Make It. And I have them t-shirts, hoodies, and sweatshirts as well. And I wanted a spiritually speaking apparel line to complement the book. So when I wrote the book, I had a t-shirt that says A Leap of Faith. And it actually was a woman with dreads leaping. And I had used the scriptures, Hebrews 11:1. And after that, I just went neutral. I didn't do anything. But last year, I said, you know what? I'm going all in. I'm going all in. I want a spiritually speaking apparel line to talk about my God and to enhance the book as well. And so I actually just started writing down different things that I want. Faith Made Me, Guts Got Me Here actually came from a friend of mine named Holly Ryan. She said, Janice, I have something for you. I said, send me your emails. Send me anything you have. That resonated with my mom. Faith Made Me, Guts Got Me Here. Faith is part of the book, the guts is too.
Right.
And then Simply Blessed is just, everything I'm talking about is just going to be inspirational, uplifting. And there is some other things I'm doing as well. Determined to Make It, my red hoodie, part of the book. So everything is connected.
So let me ask you this question. So why is it important to have this visual to you? Like why do you think that's important?
It's important to me because without saying a word, people can see. It reminds me of the scripture that talks about you shall know a tree by the fruit that it bears. That tree is speaking just by showcasing its fruit. You know, looking at my apparel line, you have a sense of what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm about, just by seeing it. It's another positive representation for me of representing what I believe, my God, my Christ. And so that was important to me. And I have other things as well, but that, right, my spiritual speaking apparel line, that's dear to me. That's dear to me. So I want it to be a visual, a representation.
Okay. So I want to thank you for just blessing me with your presence and
Thank you.
And your giftings and this book. And I want to thank you for just I believe prayer, faith, and guts. So I'm big on faith.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a faith thing. I believe that this is going to help to change the world and bring some souls to Christ, because just, again, you know, people don't always talk about stuff or maybe aren't able to articulate.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just thinking to myself, can you imagine being a person who doesn't understand things in the spirit and you're seeing entities in your house?
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the biggest issues that happened, I think we might have touched on this a little bit, but as they keep saying that we're in a mental health crisis and all of this, right? I think, and this is my opinion, I'm not a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
I just hear from God.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that a lot of people who are experiencing spiritual warfare
Mm-hmm.
get misdiagnosed with having some type of mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a quick story. I was doing a job the other day. I'm a photographer. I say, well, I'm not a photographer. I have a gift that God has given me to capture images, I believe, as if He's looking at them through His own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kept coming across people who I would show them a picture, and then they would tell me, I would show them their picture,
Mm-hmm.
and they would tell me everything that was wrong with the picture. And then I explained to them, as God explained it to me,
Mm-hmm.
is that there's several things that happen when you see your picture,
Mm-hmm.
and you respond that way. Okay, so there's God's voice,
Mm-hmm.
there's your voice,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the enemy's voice. So oftentimes, depending on where you are, you might even partner with the enemy because of whatever happened to you, trauma, whatever. So your lens is not God's lens.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at the same image that God created.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, along with the enemy's voice, that's not good enough. That's not beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And God is saying, I do great work. I am pleased with what I created. That's my own image. How could anything be wrong? How could that not be beautiful?
Fearfully and wonderfully made.
Right.
And we're created in His image.
In His image. But when we listen to those other voices, so I said that to say, I think sometimes because people don't understand in the spiritual realm
Mm-hmm.
that they're being attacked. Every voice that you hear in your head is not your voice.
That's right.
Right? And you can hear voices.
Absolutely.
Right? Internal dialogue. You can hear voices.
Absolutely.
Right? And the enemy can put voices in your head. Condemnation, guilt, all that stuff. That's his thing. Confusion. So, and then it gets misdiagnosed. And the next thing is, okay, we got a drug for that.
Right.
And now you're really opening a demonic portal.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
I'm glad that you touched on that, because for me personally, and I can speak to that, I never liked how I look. Ever. And several years ago, I shaved off all my hair. Not for any particular reason. And that was the first time I liked my face. I didn't know and didn't recognize that I was self-condemning and didn't know why. Why was I self-condemning how I looked? I didn't like how I looked. I don't like taking pictures or any of that. So when you start talking about that, that's something that I continually work on, even now. And it was a challenge. And you're talking about childhood, you're talking about trauma, you're talking about a lot of different things. Never feeling pretty, never feeling enough. I'll tell you an incident that happened some years ago. My mom and I and my baby sister were down at the marina. And I went to, it's a key bank on Elmwood and East Utica, I think it is. Elmwood, I think it was called First Niagara at one time or whatever. I think it's a key bank now, whatever. So I went into the bank that particular day, and there was a gentleman working there, and he asked me, he said, I saw you down at the marina on Saturday or something. You were with two people. And I don't know if they were like Hispanic or white or whatever, but they were really pretty. And I said, that's my mom and my sister. And it just did something to me because he didn't see me.
Right, he didn't mention you, right?
He didn't mention me at all. And when I reflect back on that, I remember growing up with that. I was never seen. Never seen. And so that was part of, and still part of my healing. Part of, not being seen, not being pretty enough, not looking like, people ask, is that your mom? Wow, she's pretty, she's beautiful. I say, she is. You look like your mom. I said, no, I look like my dad. And so I dealt with that. And so when you talked about that and the voices, even your own, even your own, Mama said, why do you think that? Why do you feel that way? And you're talking about childhood trauma and all of that. So I did experience that about my looks.
Yeah, because again, so I was blessed to have a job the other day where I had to photograph about 80 people. And I learned so much from that experience because that was so common. And what I told you about, the image thing and what I said to the people, I said it to one lady and she almost started crying. And at the end of me photographing her, she asked me if she could give me a hug. I was like, absolutely. And what I realized was that this is what God gave me to say to them. So at the end of it, like what I did was at some point I was just doing an experiment for myself because I was like, I would show them the same picture. First I would take a picture and I would show it to them and they would do the whole critique thing. And then I would tell them what God told me to tell them. And then I would have them look at the picture again. And then it was totally different. Or even their demeanor after I started taking their pictures, after I shared that with them, what God told me, then they would perk up. And I just thought to myself, that's so prevalent because we keep partnering with the enemy instead of hearing God's voice. Like it's just, that was a blessing to me because I learned a lot from that. And the one lady, and mind you, these were all professional people, and everyone was beautiful. When I say beautiful, like you, beautiful. Everybody was beautiful. And this one lady came up, and she would not smile for anything. And then I told her the thing about God, And I was like, boom. It was like a cloudy day in Buffalo, storming and everything, and then all of a sudden the sun came out. I said, whoa, like, why are you hiding that? That's anointed. That's what the enemy is after right there, that smile. Because when you did that, I guarantee you, if you walk in a room and you do that, like, the atmosphere changes. Wow. Like, that's what, the joy, that's what the enemy is after, right? Trying to, because I think I was even having a conversation with my kids today about that, about that's what the enemy, my son, he has my daughter as well, but my son has a gift of joy. He makes people laugh a lot.
Okay.
Right? So I was explaining to him that, that's going to be the attack on you, because when you walk into a room, you bring joy. Right? So the enemy does not want joy to spread. That's too much like God. That's too much like him. He doesn't want that. So then he got to try to get you early in the morning. Before you even get to school, he got to try to get you. Right? That kind of stuff. And I gave him an example. It's like, and so you take a shy person. So when I was little, I was really shy.
Okay.
Right? Like was fearful of talking to people And I actually went in the theater because I didn't like anything controlling me. So I was like, that was my way of like, I was not going to be shy anymore, right?
Okay.
But I'm still shy. But I say I'm an introverted extrovert or extroverted introvert, something like that.
Okay.
Whatever makes sense. But you know what I mean? I speak when I need to, and But I realized that even like with a shy person, because if you actually have something to say or a gift to give to the world, the enemy don't want you saying it.
No, you have a point there.
He don't want you to speak up, because then there's deliverance.
You're right. I really think God's determined to make it.
Then there's deliverance.
I speak, but I actually learn how to be quiet.
That is a gift from God.
That's a gift from God.
That is a gift from God.
Knowing how to be quiet. When I was attending Madai, it's funny, and I never spoke for 4 years. The first professor told the class, I'll never forget my very first class, Professor Patrick Gilmartin, I'll never forget him. The first question he asked, he says, by the show of hands, how many of you are comfortable with public speaking? Everyone raised their hands with the exception of me, maybe one or two other people. He said, well, you might as well get used to it, because that's what you're going to be doing all the years you're here. You're going to be presenting. And so I'll never forget our first class. We had to do a team project, and there was groups of us. And so we had to present on whatever the topic was. And so there was 4 of us in my group, and then we each had a part that we had to do. And when it came our part, they said, oh, God, Janice is up there. What is she going to do? What is she going to say? And when I spoke, they said, I only speak when I have to. During class, I never spoke. And all my professors said, you never say anything in class until it's time for you to speak. I said, that's when I'm supposed to speak. By nature, am I a quiet person? No, I'm not. But I've learned how to be quiet.
Yeah, that's wisdom. That whole thing about speaking in public, the way I got over that was God just gave me this thing where, so I still, when I have to speak to people in public, particularly like young people or large crowds, I get nervous, but I have this thing I say God gave me, and I just say, God, speak to me and through me. And then after that, it's like, I'll be like, well, it's on you now. You don't embarrass yourself. Right? So after that, it's like, I'm free. So then I feel a lot more comfortable. But I just want to thank you again for sharing your mom's life, your life, your gifting with us and the world. I look forward to all the great things that you're going to do, and that God's going to do through you and in you.
Thank you.
I want to have you back, and I want you to ask your mom if she would be interested in coming, even if she just want to sit there.
Okay.
Because I just want people to be able to see her more than just the picture, because I just think she's awesome, just based on this book, and And of course, you said it earlier, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree.
That's true.
So
that is true.
I'm just appreciating you, and she blessed me with one of these hoodies, and so thank you for that. So I'm going to ask you to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have you to look into that camera,
Okay.
and just pray for our audience. You have some very particular art gifts, and you're an orator. God has given you this gift to write this book. There's some people out there who got tons of these in them, and they've been sitting on the fence, right? And they've been waiting, and I want you to release them for that. So we're going to look right in this camera, and we're going to...
Father, in the name of Jesus, oh God, I say thank you for this day, this opportunity and privilege, oh God, to showcase not just prayer, faith, and God's determined to make it, but to showcase how big and great and awesome you are. I speak to the individuals right now, oh God, that have a book inside of them, oh God, because all of us have a book inside of us. And the book is our experiences and the things that we've gone through, the challenges, the triumphs, and all of that. Right now, God, you said we have not because we ask not. And when we do ask, we ask amiss, meaning we ask wavering and not believing. I want to say to you right now, who's looking at me in this camera, to write that book. Sit down, get a paper and pencil, and begin to write. And the Holy Spirit will allow you. He'll bring all things to your remembrance. And you'll be able to write with clarity. I pronounce blessings upon your life. And don't let 2023 pass you by. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. I pray that your book will be a bestseller and that you'll be on the show with Carl Bailey and even beyond that as well. Father, I give you all the praise, all the honor, and all of the glory, because you know why? It's all about you. It's all about the kingdom. It's all about the kingdom. I ask all these blessings in the name of Jesus. Amen.
In Jesus' name, amen. Peace, love, and God bless. And we'll see you next time.
If you're interested in purchasing Prayer, Faith, and Guts Determined to Make It, you can go on any social media outlet, Amazon, any of them. Also, I have copies if you are interested. I also have it on audio for those that are visually impaired. And I specifically had it put on that for that specific reason. If you are interested in purchasing my spiritual speaking apparel line, feel free to get in contact with me via my email. It's Miss Janice Marie Hunt at gmail.com. MS, my full name, Janice Marie Hunt at gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you and pass this on to someone else as well. Thank you.
So you want to get all of this so you can be simply blessed. Okay.